Hello to all of our listeners, and welcome back to The Parent Solution, your one stop shop for all things educational. I'm your host, Kimberly, and today's episode is just me. I'm chatting about the dreaded and often deemed unavoidable summer slide. Now, when I talk about summer slide, I'm not referring to an activity or a tool or a toy that a child might use. When I talk about summer slide, we're chatting about the idea of this theory or this fear that many parents have that their children are going to forget a majority of their educational learning that hopefully took place during the school year. The idea is that fun is going to drive all the learning out and that children are going to return to school completely dumbed down. Now, there are different ways, there's lots of ways to take advantage of the daily learning opportunities that are available in your home, even during the summer. So keep listening and maybe even take some notes, provided you're not driving and listening, that is. So let's chat about the reality of summer slide for just a second. Let's get clear on what we're talking about here. While there is definitely some truth to the idea of the summer slide, in reality, it honestly really is just an issue of memory retention. And surprise, surprise, memory retention is not just a problem in the summer, it happens all year round. I want you to think about this for a second. Really think about this. How many times do you ask your child, or perhaps a child that you know, that age-old common question, what did you learn in school today? And you receive the most common answer, right? You hear nothing, or I don't remember, or nothing important. Now, if you're like me, then I would start to wonder, what in the world am I sending you to school for? If you're not like me, then you may change the topic to ideas on what to make for dinner, or perhaps what they're doing with their friends later. Either way, those vague and empty answers that your child are giving you should begin to work on your mind if you let them instead of just brushing them away. I'd like to pause at a couple questions here. Why is it that a child can go to an educational institution for 7 hours a day, 6.5 to 7 hours a day, sit in multiple classrooms, or maybe just one, be taught curriculum, and then report back that they can't remember a single item of a lesson? I would like to say there's multiple reasons. For some, it's boredom. It's really hard to pay attention when you're completely uninterested in the subject. For others, for other students, it's that they didn't actually grasp the key points of the lesson and they don't have the ability to ask the teacher. For many students, though, it's that regular memorization is only meant to last for the short term and then it's forgotten unless it's needed on a repetitive basis. For still others, it's that they're lost in the social distractions of a room that's filled with 20 to 25 to 30 or more students their own age. However, I am going to point out a comparison here. Children who are homeschooled tend to have better memory retention than children who are raised in the traditional school system. Now, why is that? This is because the homeschool curriculum and homeschooling lifestyle sees learning as a lifestyle. It's not a job, it's not a chore, and it's certainly not a task that starts and ends on the whims of a school bell. Lessons are centered around the child, not the other way around. And this tends, of course, to support a higher level of interest and engagement. A lot of homeschooled children don't actually experience summer slide because they don't really take a summer break. They keep going, and if they don't keep going, they definitely remember what they've learned. Now, there's a couple things that you can do, even if you don't currently homeschool. There's many ways to keep your child engaged and educated and practice memory retention. So now we get to some of those tips. If you need to pull out a pen and paper, please do so. The first thing that I'd say is to change your perspective. You want to start to view learning as a continuous journey. It's not a voyage with an end point. Make sure that you look to your child's interest as a starting point and you allow that naturally facilitated process of learning. And who knows, during the summer, they may actually rediscover their love for learning. Tip number 2, get involved, because nothing, I repeat, nothing encourages a child to activate their brain more than their parent or parents actually being involved with them. If you're an active participant in your child's learning, they're going to begin to enjoy the process. Tip number 3, strategy games. Strategy games really focus on memory improvement with games such as puzzles or cards, word searches, crossword puzzles, logic puzzles. There's really great resources that feature challenges where a child has to determine what is missing and what has changed in almost identical looking pictures. My one warning is that you should be careful of too much screen time if you are using the computer for these sorts of puzzles. You want to make sure that you are balancing with physical resources and books that you can access because overused screen time can defeat the whole purpose of this practice. Tip number 4 would be dedicated time. Please, please, please remember that taking 15 to 30 minutes a day is much more effective than doing 5 hours all at once. And this is an area where traditional school falls short, especially with the younger, more active age groups that don't need hours upon hours of academic activity at a time. And my last tip, and I think this is probably the most important one, plan with your child. Because if you involve your child in the planning process, it's far more likely that you both will stick with what you've decided. Your child is involved and they've set their own goals. Set dedicated time aside to do this, though, so that you can have open conversations about expectations and stay in check with your child during the summer break. If you have to make adjustments, that's okay too. It just needs to start the conversation. You can fight summer slide by using these sorts of tips to help continue focused learning in your home. Remember, you don't want to limit learning to a certain time frame or a certain deadline. And if your child wants to keep learning about a specific subject, make sure you encourage that. Take them to a library, a museum, or a real life site where they can continue to develop with more sorts of hands-on approaches. And always, when possible, always allow them to incorporate what they've learned into daily life. And that is all for this week's episode of The Parent Solution. If you have any comments or questions, either about this issue or others that have come up for you, you can always find us on social media. It's Star Students on Facebook and LinkedIn, or starstudents.learning on Instagram. You can also reach out through email, which is all over social media channels. Thank you, as always, so much for listening, and I'll be back next week.